Joseph. Joseph was one of Jacob's 12 sons. His story is told still in the book of Genesis. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son because he was born at his old age. But Joseph was hated by his brothers on account of his dream foretelling his future dominion over them. Joseph dreamt that when he and his brothers were binding sheaves on the field, his sheaf arose and his brother's sheaf made obeisance to his sheaf. Then, in another dream, he saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars made obeisance to him. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to join his brothers, who were grazing his flock. Out of jealousy, his brothers plotted to kill him. Reuben tried to rescue him from the murder and advised them to throw him in the waterless cistern instead. They left him in the cistern until a caravan of Ishmaelites, the descendants of Ishmael, who were later associated with Midianite Arabs, passed by. Judah came up with the idea to sell Joseph for 20 shekels of silver to these merchants who were going to Egypt. This they did without the consent of Reuben. Then Joseph's brothers smeared Joseph's colorful coat with goat's blood and told their father that the wild animal had devoured Joseph. Joseph was carried to Egypt and sold as a slave to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. Joseph's trial. Joseph prospered in Potiphar's household because God was with him and was eventually made head of the servants. Joseph grew into a well-built and handsome man. One day, Potiphar's wife attempted to seduce him. When he rejected her, Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of molesting her and supported her false accusation with a piece of Joseph's garment. As a result, Joseph was sent to prison. 2 servants of Pharaoh's household were in jail with Joseph and asked him to interpret their dreams. Joseph correctly predicted the future based on their dreams. One prisoner would be reinstated in his post, while the other would be executed. Joseph urged the first prisoner, a royal cupbearer, to get him out of prison once he was reinstated. But once the cupbearer got out of prison, he forgot about it, until 2 years later, the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, was troubled by a dream that no one was able to interpret. In the dream, he saw 7 cows, sleek and fat, came out of the river Nile and grazed among the reeds. After that, 7 other ugly and gaunt cows came out of the river and stood on the riverbank. The chief cupbearer remembered Joseph, and at his suggestion, Joseph was brought from the prison to interpret the king's dream. Joseph predicted 7 years of plenty to be followed by 7 years of famine, and advised the Pharaoh to appoint someone to store up surplus grain. Pharaoh recognized that Joseph was a man of God, and was pleased with Joseph's interpretation and advice, so he gave Joseph authority over all of the land of Egypt. At the age of 30, Joseph married the daughter of the Egyptian priest, by whom he had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Joseph's prediction came true. When 7 years of abundance happened, Joseph stored a huge amount of grain. After that, severe famine came not only to Egypt, but in the whole world. Then Pharaoh commanded Joseph to take care of the matter and made him the governor of the land. During the famine, Joseph's brothers, except for Benjamin, came down to Egypt to buy grain. On reaching Egypt, Joseph's brothers, not recognizing him, bowed themselves with their faces to the earth before him, thus fulfilling a part of his earlier dream. Nevertheless, in order to fulfill the dream completely, Joseph needed Benjamin to come to Egypt as well. So he disguised his identity from his brothers and devised a plot. He accused them of being spies and imprisoned them for 3 days. He then sent them away with the grain, retaining Simeon as a hostage, while ordering them to return with Benjamin. When their food stores ran out and the famine worsened, Judah became a surety of his brother Benjamin, and persuaded Jacob to let him go down to Egypt, according to the request of Joseph. Jacob accepted Judah's promise to protect Benjamin from harm. Their brothers returned to Joseph. Then they bowed themselves to him to the earth. Joseph saw Benjamin, and he was overcome with emotion. So he welcomed them kindly and threw a feast for them. Before they left, Joseph tested his brothers further by accusing Benjamin of theft. He purposely commanded his steward to fill their sacks with food and put their money back in the sacks, and also put his silver cup inside Benjamin's sack. Here, Judah made a most touching and persuasive plea for the release of Benjamin, offering himself as a slave instead. Convinced of his brother's repentance and overcome with emotion, Joseph finally revealed his identity to his brothers. He forgave them, sent for Jacob and all their families to come to settle in Egypt. Death of Jacob and prophecy of the 12 tribes of Israel. The Israelites dwelt and multiplied in Goshen, Egypt, exceedingly well. Israel, or Jacob, himself dwelt in Goshen for 17 years, until the end of his days. When Israel felt the approach of death at 147 years old, he sent for his sons, including Joseph and Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob blessed both but gave higher blessing to the younger one. Then Jacob revealed the future of his 12 sons, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, and their descendants. Below are several of the predictions. Reuben would not excel, for he defiled Israel's bed with Bilhah. Simeon and Levi were rebuked for their cruelty. They would be divided and scattered in Israel. Judah would be praised by his brothers. He would be victorious against his enemies, and his children would bow down before him. Note, presumably because he proposed the idea of selling Joseph to slavery instead of killing him, and also for offering himself to slavery instead of Benjamin. The scepter, symbol of sovereignty, would not depart from Judah until Shiloh came, and unto him would the gathering of the people be. Note, Shiloh is a Hebrew term meaning he who it is, or he to whom it belongs. Most Christian scholars interpret this prophetic verse that the authority of the covenant stayed with the Jewish monarchy or descendant of Judah until Jesus Christ. Joseph would be blessed above the rest. Then Jacob asked to be gathered unto his people at the cave of Patriarch in Canaan. After Jacob was embalmed, with Pharaoh's permission, Joseph led a huge state funeral back to the land of Canaan. This event ended the time of the Israelites' patriarch, i.e., Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph lived to the age of 110 in Egypt. Shortly before his death, he made the Israelites take an oath that they would resettle his bones in Canaan.